The winter of 1931 arrived in Copenhagen like a slow exhale from the North Sea, bringing a cold that seemed to enter the very breath of the city. Street lamps glowed like small moons against the heavy snowfall, and the air carried the scent of coal smoke. In a small apartment above a bakery, a young woman named Eline Mortensen sat at her desk, writing a letter by candlelight. She pressed her fountain pen carefully to the paper, as if a harsh stroke might disturb the quiet hush of snow outside. She had always loved winter, its slowness, the way the world seemed wrapped in soft white, but this year felt different. There was a hollowness to the season, an emptiness she couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was because her brother had left to work on a new bridge. Or maybe, she thought, it was because the world itself seemed uneasy. But tonight, she wasn't writing about troubles. She was writing to a stranger. It had all begun 3 weeks earlier, when a pale blue envelope appeared in her mailbox. No return address, just her name in an elegant, old-fashioned script. Inside was a short note, to Miss Eline Mortensen, "Your window glows warmly on the coldest nights. It has reminded me that light still exists where one least expects it. Forgive my intrusion, consider this merely a whisper of gratitude." A watcher of winter, the letter should have alarmed her, but instead, it felt strangely gentle. Her landlord's wife declared it either romantic or suspicious, maybe both. But Eline sensed no malice, the words were too tender for harm. So, she wrote back, a simple thank you, asking how they knew her name. She didn't expect a reply. But 2 days later, another letter arrived, and then another. Now, with December settling deep into the city, she found herself writing the 5th letter. She paused, gazing at the frost-laced window. Outside, a man trudged past, his boots sinking silently into the snow. Everything was slowed by winter, softened by white. She dipped her pen again and continued. "You speak of watching winter," she wrote, "yet the winter I see feels lonelier than any before. Perhaps it is because I spend most of my nights here alone. Still, your letters make the season feel less cold. If you wish to remain unnamed, I respect that, but tell me why choose me? Of all windows glowing in Copenhagen, why mine?" She sealed the envelope with a small sigh, feeling a little foolish. But the letters had become a small anchor in her winter, a ritual she couldn't ignore. She stepped out into the hallway to place the letter in the mailbox downstairs. The snow had deepened, and the bakery sign creaked in the wind. As she returned upstairs, she heard a soft thumb paper sliding against wood. A new letter lay at her door, her breath caught. She reached down, her fingertips trembling, and lifted the envelope. Same pale blue paper, same elegant script, but this time, a faint scent clung to it, like pine forest after a snowfall. She slipped inside, bolted the door, and carefully opened the envelope. "Miss Mortensen," it read, "you ask why your window. Perhaps because it has remained warm when so many others have darkened. Perhaps because in watching it, I am reminded of a time before the world grew loud and hurried. Perhaps because the light you keep is the kind that keeps other strangers alive. Forgive this boldness. I will explain more, in time." A watcher of winter, Eline exhaled slowly. The words tugged at her heart in a way she didn't understand. But one line pulled at her attention. "I will explain more, in time." There was a story behind these letters, something not yet spoken. Outside, snow pressed harder against the glass, and Copenhagen seemed to sink deeper into winter. In the flickering candle light, the letter looked almost centuries old, as if carried not by the mail, but by the cold wind itself. Eline folded the page, her heart quickening. Something had begun, something delicate, something strange, and she wasn't sure if she had invited it, or if winter had simply chosen her. Copenhagen awoke to a blanket of new snow the morning after the letter arrived. The rooftops of Vesterbro were like quiet white islands, their chimneys breathing slow curls of smoke into a pale sky. The world was a muffled silence, broken only by the distant clatter of a tram. I wrapped my wool scarf twice around my neck before stepping outside. The baker downstairs waved at me through the window, the glass fogging with warmth. Across the street, An old man swept snow from his doorstep with the patience of someone who had known many winters, but my thoughts weren't on errands. They were on the pale blue envelope still on my desk. Who was this watcher? Why such careful handwriting and strange, timeless words? I walked toward Nytorv, where I worked part-time at a small stationery shop. The city center was livelier. Crowds trudged through the snow, and carriage wheels cracked the icy slush. As I approached the square, I noticed something peculiar. A figure stood at the far end. Not moving, not pacing for warmth, just standing. He wore a dark overcoat and a charcoal gray scarf. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face. He wasn't looking at the street or the shops. He was looking toward me, watching. My breath caught. I slowed but didn't stop. Pedestrians passed between us, but his stillness made him stand out. I reached the door of the stationery shop and hesitated. Turning my head, the man remained, unmoving. But when a tram rattled past, blocking my view for just a heartbeat, he was gone. Vanished into the winter air. A shiver traveled down my spine. Inside the shop, the familiar warmth and the scent of old paper steadied me. Mrs. Ritt, the owner, sat at the counter. Snow thicker than porridge this morning. She muttered without looking up. Yes, I replied quietly. You look pale, child. Did the frost bite you? Didn't sleep well, I offered. She nodded, believing everyone had a secret in winter. Hours passed, filled with the chime of the door and customers buying holiday cards. But my mind kept wandering back to the man in the square. Could it have been him, the watcher of winter? Or just a coincidence? By late afternoon, Mrs. Ritt sent me home early. I stepped into the dusk. The snowfall had thickened, and street lamps cast halos of golden fog. Halfway down my street, I noticed footprints. A single line of them, deep and crisp, leading forward in the snow, but stopping abruptly at a corner where no one stood. I knelt and brushed the edge of the nearest print. It was fresh, minutes old. A strange sensation bloomed in my chest, not fear, but a sharp curiosity. Then I saw it, out of the corner of my eye movement. A shadow slipping behind a building, too fast, too quiet. Silent as snowfall. My breath shuddered. I took a step back and began walking faster, my boots crunching in the deep snow. I heard only the falling snow and my own heartbeat. By the time I reached my apartment building, my hands were trembling. I pushed inside, closing the heavy door. Upstairs, the bakery's warmth seeped through the floorboards, easing my nerves. But when I approached my apartment door, I froze. Another pale blue envelope lay on the floor. The same elegant handwriting. My pulse quickened. I picked it up slowly and carried it to my desk. Snowflakes melted from my hair onto the wooden floor. I opened the letter. Miss Mortensen, forgive what you witnessed today. It was not my intention to unsettle you. I watched only to ensure you were safe. There are things stirring in this city, things I hoped you would never notice. But if you have seen me, then perhaps our winter has accelerated. Please, do not fear me. There is a story you must know. I will write again soon. A watcher of winter, my heart raced. There are things stirring in this city. The words felt heavy, carrying a truth he couldn't speak directly. I looked toward my frosted window. The street below was empty, yet I felt watched. Not maliciously, but by something patient as snow. A knock echoed from the bakery downstairs, startling me. I reread the letter, tracing the ink. What story was he hinting at? Why me? What was lurking in Copenhagen? Outside, the wind rattled my window. For the first time, I wondered if this was more than a poetic exchange. If it was the first sign of something unfolding around me, like the tightening grip of winter. I sat there long into the night, holding the letter, as it offered no further truths, only the silence of Copenhagen's deepening winter. The days after our meeting at Nytorv had a strange kind of stillness. It was as if all of Copenhagen was holding its breath. The snow just kept falling, sometimes light like ash, other times so heavy it felt like a curtain was dropping over the city. The street lamps seemed dimmer, their light struggling to cut through the cold air. I kept to my routine, work at the stationery shop, go home, and write by candlelight. But something was different. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't constant or threatening, just a subtle presence I'd catch at the edge of my vision. A figure at the end of the street, a shadow moving just out of sight, footsteps that would stop the moment I turned around, and every night a new letter from him would appear. Each one felt more urgent, yet more restrained than the last. The watcher of winter seemed torn, dancing around truths he refused to say outright, as if the ink itself was too scared to form the words. Then, on the fourth night, the letter was different. It was just one sentence. I fear the snow will reach you soon. That was it. No poetry, no gentle tone, just raw fear, for me. I barely slept that night. I just lay there, listening to the wind groaning against the shutters and the weak hiss of the radiator. But underneath it all, I sensed something else gathering in the city, something that wasn't part of any normal winter. The next morning, I went to work early. Mrs. Ritt took one look at me and knew. "You truly haven't slept, have you, dear?" she asked. I admitted I hadn't. She leaned in closer, her voice low. "Winters like this, they bring strange moods. When I was a girl, there was a man who wrote anonymous letters to half the neighborhood, claimed he saw things in the snow, said he watched people to keep them safe. My heart jumped. Did anyone know who he was?" Mrs. Ritt just shrugged. "No. Some said he was lonely. Some said he was mad." I had to ask, "And what do you think?" She gave me a soft smile, but her eyes were serious. "I think winter can make even sane people act strangely." By the afternoon, the snow was coming down thick again. For the first time I could remember, Mrs. Ritt closed the shop early. "You should go straight home," she insisted. "A storm's coming." The moment I stepped outside, I was swallowed by a swirl of white. The wind was brutal. I walked as fast as I could, but I didn't feel alone. Halfway home, I saw him, a man, standing perfectly still at the end of the street. He was taller, broader than any figure I'd seen before. His coat was long, his hat pulled low. He was facing away from me, toward a dark alley. A chill went right through me. Something about him just felt wrong, not dangerous, but unnatural, like he didn't belong in this world. I took a different street, a longer route, my heart pounding. When I finally got back to my building, another letter was waiting at my door, but this one was completely different. The paper wasn't the watcher's pale blue, it was coarse, plain white. The writing was thick, uneven, pressed so hard into the page. My blood ran cold. This wasn't from him. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "You do not know who watches you, but you must stop answering him. Stop reading, stop writing, stop looking for him. He is not what he seems." No signature, just a frantic, desperate warning. My apartment suddenly felt suffocating. Who was this other person? And why were they so afraid of the watcher? Just then, a soft knock came at my door. I froze. Another knock? Quieter this time. Then, silence. I crept to the peephole. No one. Just snow. I took the two letters and laid them side by side on my desk. Two warnings. One gentle, one desperate. I didn't know who to trust, who to fear, but I knew I couldn't just sit here anymore. I put my coat back on and walked out into the storm. I wasn't sure where I was going, but my feet carried me toward a place hinted at in the Watcher's letters. Leelstrandstræde, a narrow street near Nyhavn. As I got closer, the storm seemed to hush. The street was almost abandoned, snow piled against shuttered townhouses. Then I saw it, a small, dark house at the very end. But a faint glow seeped from behind the curtains. I hesitated, but stepped closer. The light vanished, and then I saw them. Footprints in the snow leading to the door. And another set, much lighter, leading away. They were so shallow, so narrow, as if whoever made them barely touched the ground. A faint creak broke the silence. The front door of the house was opening, just a crack. A whisper slipped out, soft as the snow itself. "Miss Mortensen, you shouldn't have come here." I knew that voice. It was the Watcher of Winter, and he sounded absolutely terrified. Not for himself, for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you're captivated by this unfolding mystery, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. See you in the next video. For a long moment, Eline couldn't move. She stood before the narrow sliver of the door, snow swirling around her boots. The street behind her was silent to silent. The voice from inside, the Watcher's voice, was gentle, hesitant. "Miss Mortensen," he whispered again, "you must leave. You are not safe here." Eline swallowed. "I came because you said the snow would reach me, because someone else is writing to me, someone who seems to know you." A painful silence followed. Then the door opened wider, just enough for her to see him. Not clearly, only the faint outline of a man in the dimness. His face remained half hidden by shadows, but his eyes caught the glow of a single oil lamp. They were deep, haunted, and heavy with something she couldn't name. He stepped back. "You were never meant to be part of this. Your life was quiet, warm, untouched by these old things. I only watched because you said my window gave you hope." Eline finished softly. A soft, almost broken sound escaped him. "Yes." Eline stepped closer. "Tell me what this is. Tell me who wrote the second letter. Tell me who you are." Snowflakes drifted between them, melting on the warm threshold. He raised his head, and in the flickering lamplight, she saw how tired he looked. Tired in a way that came from holding back a storm with his bare hands. "I cannot tell you everything," he said. "Not safely. Not here." "Then tell me something." Eline pressed. "Why me? Why the letters? Why the watching?" The Watcher closed his eyes. "Because," he said finally, "in a city drowning in shadows, your window was the first warm thing I had seen in years." He continued, his voice quieter now. "There are men in Copenhagen who belong to an old circle. They believe winter reveals truths meant to stay buried. They search for people like me. People who see too much." Eline's pulse quickened. "And the rough letter, was it from them?" "Yes," he said, the word like a weight. "They do not want you near me. They fear you will learn something you should not." She took a step forward. "And will I?" He didn't answer with words, but the pain on his shadowed face was an answer louder than any confession. Eline placed her hand on the doorframe. "If you are in danger, why write to me? Why involve me at all?" His voice broke. "Because winter is lonely when one stands in it alone." Before she could reply, a sound cut through the silence. Footsteps, approaching. Fast. The Watcher's expression changed instantly. He seized her wrist, pulling her into the doorway. "They found me," he whispered. Outside, 3 dark silhouettes emerged through the snow. A heavy knock thundered against the door. 3 knocks? Slow. Deliberate? The Watcher pressed a finger to his lips. Another knock? Harder. Then a voice, low and flat. "Open the door." The Watcher leaned close to her ear. "When I open it, run. Do not look back." "No, I won't leave you. You must. Because I will not survive if you stay." Another thunderous knock shook the frame. He gripped her shoulders. "Run. And if winter ever brings you another letter, do not answer it." He gently pushed her toward the back door of the small house, then turned and opened the front door. Light spilled in, and the silhouette stepped forward. Eline ran, out into a narrow alley filled with swirling snow. Behind her, she heard raised voices, the heavy slam of a door, then shouts swallowed by the storm. But she didn't look back. She ran until the alley widened, until she saw the lights of Nyhavn. When she finally stopped, shaking, the alley behind her was empty, silent, only snow. She walked home, collapsing at her desk. She saw the letters lay where she had left them. But something new lay on top, a final envelope, frost cold. She opened it with numb fingers. "Miss Mortensen, forgive me. Forgive the fear I have brought into your quiet life. Know that your window was the last warm thing I saw as I walked through these winters alone. And if the snow ever returns with whispers of me, let them fade. Your world must remain warm untouched by the cold I carry. Thank you, your watcher of winter. A drop of melted snow, or perhaps a tear, landed on the page. Eline pressed the letter to her chest. Outside, the world began to thaw. She never saw him again. He faded into memory, into snow, but his letters remained. And long after, on quiet nights when snow whispered against the windows, Eline sometimes felt the faintest warmth touch her window pane, as though someone, somewhere, was watching over winter one last time.